Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our group learning program, and we're going to be studying the 5 Precepts. This is part of Chapter 7 of Volume 1 in this book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. In this chapter, you're going to be learning about 5 very impactful decisions that you can be making that will either be wise and produce wholesome results or unwise and produce unwholesome results. The Buddha is going to be sharing with you teachings that are going to further help you to understand the natural laws of existence, namely the natural law of Kamma. If you've ever studied that the Buddha taught no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, no intoxicants, this isn't what the Buddha actually taught. He didn't teach in that way. This sounds like it's rules or commandments or something that's black and white. You're going to see by using the original words of the Buddha and studying with the original words of the Buddha that he provides much more illuminating language that is very precise, very concise, and really helps you to understand this natural law. I'm going to be sharing with you the original words of the Buddha on each of the individual 5 precepts, and then sharing with you certain decisions that you might be making in daily life by applying these precepts so that you can see more and more clearly how to apply them in your daily life. As we go, you're welcome to ask any and all questions that you like. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, and we'll be able to see your question and then answer it during the class. If you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions or follow-up questions directly. So thank you so much for being here. I'm going to use some visual aids to be able to help me to share the content with you and for you to be able to learn so that you can learn with the original words of the Buddha. So the first thing to understand as it relates to the 5 precepts is that what the Buddha is sharing with you is the natural law of Kamma, or cause and effect, or action and result. Some people refer to this as karma. This is the Sanskrit version. It's just a different language, but essentially referring to the same natural law. If you study the original teachings of the Buddha in the Pali language, which the original teachings are captured in this language of Pali, then the word Kamma is being used there. So you'll see that people who study the original teachings of the Buddha will tend to use this word Kamma. The word Kamma, if it would translate to one English word, I would just use that English word, but unfortunately there isn't just one English word that this can translate to, so I still need to use this Pali word. In situations where I can translate things to one English word, which is the vast majority of the Buddhist teachings, I just use those English words. But there's about maybe 2 or 3 words that don't exactly translate to just one English word, so I still need to use the Pali version of that word. So the natural law of Kamma is cause and effect, or action and result. It's the results of your decisions. Sometimes people think it's punishments and rewards, or something mystical or magical, or that there's some being or some entity that's controlling Kamma. This isn't actually true. It's literally cause and effect, or this causality, or the sequencing of events, that whatever decisions you make, they're either going to be wise decisions or unwise decisions. And then you're going to experience the results of those decisions, either wholesome results if you've made a wise decision, or you're going to be experiencing unwholesome results if you've made an unwise decision. So when you lack wisdom of this natural law of Kamma, you're going to naturally make unwise decisions that lead to unwholesome results. So what the 5 precepts are doing are helping you to awaken to the wisdom of this natural law. And all the teachings of the Buddha in one way or another are coming back to this natural law to be able to help you understand it. And then with that wisdom, you'll naturally make wiser decisions that lead to wholesome results. So when we talk about awakening to enlightenment, What you're awakening to is the wisdom of the natural laws of existence, and namely this natural law of Kamma, so that with that improved wisdom, you can now make wise decisions that lead to wholesome results, extinguishing all unwholesome results in your life. And you've done essentially the same thing as it relates to other natural laws in your life as well, that you've learned a certain aspect of a natural law, you reflected on it, and then you practiced it. And gradually over time, as you cultivated wisdom of this natural law, you started making wiser decisions that produced wholesome results. Where when you lacked wisdom, you made unwise decisions and it produced unwholesome results. If you think back to when you were a child, you didn't understand the natural law of gravity. You really struggled and had difficulties with this natural law. So therefore, you made unwise decisions that produced unwholesome results. You fell down, you hit your head, your elbow, your knees, you needed band-aids in order to fix those things. You cried and were upset maybe when you fell down. You maybe broke certain objects or certain toys or things like this, and you really struggled with this natural law because you lacked wisdom of it. So therefore you made unwise decisions that produced unwholesome results. We all did as we were growing up. But slowly but surely, we awoke to this wisdom of the natural law of gravity. And then when we learned about it, we reflected on it and we started practicing. By the time we were 10 or 12, we started understanding to tie our shoes nice and tight. We looked at the surface that we walked on and made sure that we were consciously walking and making wise decisions about how we walked on the earth. We started to understand how to ride a bicycle, climb a ladder, fly in an airplane, and all these other things that we can now do because we fully awoke to the wisdom of this natural law. So the same thing that you did with that natural law in order to eliminate the struggles and difficulties that you experience is the same thing you need to do in order to get to the enlightened mental state, is awaken to the natural law of Kamma and all these other natural laws that the Buddha taught. This cause and effect, or action and result. If you realize that what you experience in your life, your decisions, and your results, then if there's anything that you find undesirable or displeasurable about your life, you can actually make decisions to improve that by understanding the cause and effect, or the action and result, this causality of the natural law of Kamma. So as you understand these natural laws, you will get to the point where you no longer will struggle and have difficulties in life. You might have certain struggles and difficulties now that when you come to a certain decision, you might really struggle about how to make that decision. And then once you make the decision, you might not be very confident whether it was a wise decision or unwise decision. So that 5 precepts are going to help you to understand 5 impactful decisions, and the Buddha is going to provide you this guidance to understand this natural law so that you can now awaken to it. And of course, there's other aspects of the natural law of Kamma that you need to learn beyond the 5 precepts, but this is a really good start to helping you understand this natural law to a certain degree. So as you're learning about the 5 precepts, it's important to understand that the Buddha isn't giving you rules or commandments. He's not trying to convince you to do anything specific. He's just helping you to understand this natural law so that as you learn it, reflect on it, and practice it, you can see the truth more and more closely for yourself. And what I'm here to do is provide you guidance around this teaching so that then you can start to understand it more and more clearly, because there's this large gray area. It's not really truly black and white the way that some people might present the natural law of Kamma or the 5 precepts. Instead, you're going to see language that the Buddha used that is much more illuminating to help you beyond just no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, and no intoxicants. Understanding the 5 precepts just kind of in a basic sense, these are guidance that significantly reduces the unwholesome Kamma production that assist you in producing a pure mind and a pure life. That these 5 decisions, if you understand the 5 precepts, you can significantly reduce the unwholesome results in your life. But it's not going to fully extinguish your unwholesome Kamma. That's the Eightfold Path that fully extinguishes the unwholesome Kamma. But the 5 precepts will significantly reduce it. And the 5 precepts actually plug into the Eightfold Path. They integrate into it in order to help you to be able to produce this practice of harmlessness, because the Eightfold Path is this core central teaching. This is something that I taught 2 weeks ago. And then I mentioned to you that there's other teachings that plug into it, like the Three Universal Truths, the Four Noble Truths, the Five Precepts, certain meditation training, and various things like this along your journey to enlightenment. You'll see that they actually plug into the Eightfold Path, further helping you to understand more details about the Eightfold Path itself. And it's all based around harmlessness, because this natural law of Kamma, of cause and effect, if you put out harm, harm's going to come back to you. So the Buddha is guiding you and helping you to be able to see true reality and awaken to the wisdom of this natural law so that you can reduce your harm through the Five Precepts. But it's the Eightfold Path that's going to completely eliminate all the harm that you're causing to be able to make wise decisions that produce wholesome results. These Five Precepts, as I share them with you, you might notice that there's some connections or similarities even to things that you learned growing up from your primary caregivers, like your mom or dad, your grandparents, your aunts and uncles, and other people that were very influential in your life. There are certain aspects of the teachings of the Buddha that you might see other people kind of sharing to a certain degree, because these are the natural laws of existence, and various people have tapped into these natural laws at different times, and they explain them in different ways here and there. So it's the Buddha who fully awoke to them and described them in a way that's timeless. You'll see the language that he uses around the Five Precepts, that it can be applied during his life 2,500 years ago, and it can be applied throughout time, because he taught in a way that's timeless, and an individual can apply those teachings throughout time. And you might notice this connection to things that you learned growing up from your primary caregivers. But now you're going to see language from the Buddha that is much more penetrating, much more clear and concise. And I'm going to help you to understand the why behind these decisions and why it's important to awaken to this natural law so that you can make decisions that are going to lead to this wholesome results. So let me share with you the very first precept using the words of the Buddha, and then I will help you to understand it and apply it to various things that you will encounter in your day-to-day life. This is the language of the Buddha, the way that he taught the first precept. He says, abandoning the taking of life, refraining from taking life, without stick or sword, diligent, compassionate, trembling for the welfare of all living beings. So here you can see this is much more clear than no killing. If you used the phrase no killing, this sounds black and white, and you might have difficulties applying it to any particular given situation. So as you learn the words of the Buddha and you see his exact words, you should investigate this. You're not believing his teachings and just hoping something good happens when you die. You're learning his teachings now in this life. You're reflecting on them to see if they're true. You're trying to independently verify them. And then you practice his teachings now in daily life to be able to see the truth for yourself, that they work, and your mind becomes more peaceful and joyful, moving to this enlightened mental state. So when you see a phrase like this and you see a teaching where he's talking about abandoning the taking of life and living compassionate for the welfare of all living beings, one of the first things you might ask yourself is, well, what's a living being? You're not interested in assuming that you understand what a living being is. So you're going to need to get clarity on what a living being is. So a easy way that I share with people to get started to understand a living being is that there's an egg, there's a sperm, and there's a consciousness, or the mind. So you can use that as kind of like a shorthand way to figure out if there's a living being or not. But in reality, the Buddha taught something much more detailed than this to be able to help you discern and make a decision of whether something is a living being or not. He taught something called the five aggregates. Some people call it the five collections or the five elements, because these are the five things that each individual living being will have. There's physical form, there's feelings, perception, volitional formations, and consciousness. I'm going to explain what each of these five are to help you be able to understand what a living being is. Physical form, a living being is going to have physical form. And you know you're a living being, so you can actually reflect on this while I'm teaching it to you, that you know you have physical form, right? There's a certain physical structures here that make up this particular body that this mind inhabits. So there's a certain physical form. Then a living being is going to have feelings. They're going to have pleasant feelings, painful feelings, or neither painful nor pleasant. So there's happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. There's sadness, anger, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear. There's boredom, loneliness, shyness, resentment, jealousy. There's displeasure. There's these different feelings that a living being is going to be experiencing. Then there's a certain perceptions. This is the third aggregate. What a perception is your views and opinions and the way you look out at the world and the way you see the world. You perceive the world in a certain way. You have certain perceptions about the world. And then there's volitional formations. This is also choices or decisions, that there are certain choices and decisions. You have the freedom to make choices and decisions. And then you're going to experience the results of those choices and decisions. And then the fifth aggregate is a consciousness or the mind. So each living being is going to have form, feeling, perception, volitional formations, which are choices and decisions, and there's a consciousness there. So you know that you have all five of these, and you can independently reflect on that and see that to be the truth. But then you can look at things like a dog or a cat or a bird or a snake or things like this, and you can see that these things have a consciousness as well. They have all five of these aggregates, even fish and snails and worms. They have all five. They have form, feeling, perception, volitional formations, and a consciousness. So you can reflect on this to independently verify that living beings that you know to be living beings have all five of these. And then another way to independently verify that is to take something that you know without a shadow of a doubt is not a living being and reflect on that and see if it actually describes a living being or not through the five aggregates. So like this desk that I'm sitting at or this computer. You can look at your electronic device or the chair that you're sitting in. Does it have physical form? You can answer that for yourself. And the answer is yes, it has physical form. Does it have feelings? The answer is no. This desk, this computer, it doesn't have feelings. Does it have perceptions? No, it doesn't have perceptions. It doesn't have certain views or opinions about the world. Does it have volitional formations? Can it make choices and decisions? Can this desk choose to pick itself up, walk down the street, and move itself to a different location? No, the desk or the computer can't make those types of decisions. Does it have a consciousness or a mind? And the answer is no, it doesn't. So one of the challenges is that in the unenlightened state, we use language and we use vocabulary and words in ways that doesn't represent true reality. We might say that we've killed a tree, or we've killed a bacteria, or we've killed a virus. But in reality, we haven't killed those things because they're not actual living beings. A tree isn't a living being. We've harvested a tree, or we harvest broccoli, or we harvest cauliflower, but we haven't killed it. And we've eliminated bacteria from the body, or some kind of virus has been eliminated. We haven't actually killed it because it's not a living being. So when the Buddha is talking about refraining from the taking of life and living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, he's not talking about living compassionately for this desk or this computer or bacteria or virus or something like this. It's obviously wise to pay attention to the plants that we have around us because we know they provide us oxygen and other resources that we need in order to sustain life. But when we harvest a plant, we haven't killed it because it doesn't have all five aggregates. So here, this helps you to further understand what a living being is so that now you can apply this precept of living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings to any situation that you're involved in. And notice that the Buddha isn't saying preserve all life at all cost. That's not what he's saying. So as we go through some of these examples, you're going to hear me talk about this big, large gray area, not only with this precept, but with other precepts as well, so that you can start seeing more and more clearly how to apply this. So he's not saying preserve all life at all cost. He's saying live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. So you're going to need to look at things like euthanasia of a human or animal, termination of a pregnancy, suicide, assisted suicide, capital punishment, war, government-sponsored killing, and murder, and look to see, am I living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings? Because these are intentional killings, but in certain situations, you need to ask yourself, is this living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings? So let's just take one of these to talk about, and maybe we'll take more than one. And we can discuss this, and I can help you see how it's not black and white. You need to look at the variables and you need to make decisions for yourself in any given situation. My goal as a teacher isn't to tell you what to do. I'm not attempting to convince you of what you should or shouldn't do. Instead, I'm just helping you to see the natural law of Kamma, and then you make the decisions for yourself of what you think is wise. Because in each situation, there's various variables that you're going to need to look at and decide what's going to be wise for you and what's going to be unwise for you. And because I'm not going to be in that situation and I don't know all the different variables, only you can make that determination. But I can kind of point out a few things for you to consider, and then it will help you to deeper reflect and then make a wise decision that will produce wholesome results. No matter what decision you made in any of these situations, I'm still here to help you and guide you. I don't have a certain preconceived notion or wanting you to make a decision in any particular way, but more just letting you understand and guiding you to understand the natural law. So let's take something like termination of a pregnancy. This is one to look at and be able to apply, living compassionate for the welfare of all living beings. In some cultures and in some countries, people look at termination of a pregnancy as a political decision. This isn't how I look at it at all. It's a human decision. It's something that we face as human beings of whether or not we should terminate a pregnancy or not. And it's not about politics or making a law of it should be one way or another, but more or less helping you to understand all the different variables to be able to apply this precept. So if we look at a situation where an individual might be considering terminating a pregnancy, either the woman or even if she's involving her life partner or other people in the decision, you need to look at whether or not you're living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. And each situation is going to be a bit different. If we have a situation where there's a fetus inside of a woman and medical technology tells us that this fetus is never going to be a viable human being, meaning that it can't live outside the womb and it's not going to have a viable life, but yet it's threatening the health of the woman and this woman could actually die, then the woman might come to the conclusion that to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, I need to live compassionately for this being who you are right now. And if you allowed this fetus to continue to grow in the uterus, that this would then threaten the life of this woman, and you would be maybe risking potential death. And knowing that this fetus can't ever live outside the womb, would you be interested to do that? Would that be living compassionate for the welfare of all living beings? And you might come to the conclusion that it would be wise to terminate this pregnancy. And you can live without any guilt or any fear or anything like this because you know you've practiced in such a way that you're living compassionately for this being who you are. Because the way that loving kindness and compassion works is you have to first have loving kindness and compassion for yourself before you can have it for other beings. Loving kindness is active goodwill, this genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. Compassion is the concern for the misfortune of others. So if you're looking to have compassion for beings' misfortune and practice this welfare for all living beings, you need to have that for yourself first. So you might come to the conclusion that in a certain situation, it could be wise to terminate a pregnancy. But then if you're noticing that you're regularly terminating pregnancy in order to maybe use birth control rather than using some kind of contraception, then maybe if you're continuously using termination of pregnancy in order to not have a child, you might look at that and decide whether that's living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings or not. And then you might look at things like war or government-sponsored killings, because the natural law of Kamma is functioning at a much higher level than the human laws. The human laws, a government can tell you to go to this other country and kill people in that other country, and that they're not going to prosecute you for murder if you do that. But if you come to their country and you kill, that they're going to prosecute you for murder. This is a human that's sharing this, right? And someone might be guided to do these kinds of things. But this natural law of Kamma functions at a much higher level than the human laws. So if you end up going away to any country or you start killing, this is going to affect you because you're going to experience the cause and effect or the action and result of this. And you're very likely to be injured. You could have certain traumatic injuries. You could suffer from various emotions and feelings. You could potentially get addicted to drugs or alcohol as part of this. Some people even commit suicide who go off to war, and maybe they even come back and they commit suicide because of this. This is all the results of their decisions. And people might even get killed in war themselves. And when we're killing, then we're very likely to be killed ourselves. And no government law can protect you from the natural law of Kamma. So while a government might tell you that it's okay to go to a foreign country and kill, if you're doing that killing, then you're to experience the results of those decisions. And in each situation, you have to decide for yourself what would be wise and what would be unwise. And you can see this natural law of Kamma more and more clearly for yourself. Then you can look at things like defense and protection, because if you're going off killing, you might ask yourself, well, what if I'm at home and I'm sleeping and at 2 a.m. somebody breaks into my house? What should I do? Should I defend myself? Should I protect myself? How should I apply this precept? Well, remember, you're living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, and that needs to start with yourself. So if somebody breaks in at 2 a.m. in the morning, I can assure you that they're not bringing you chocolate and flowers. People don't break into your house at 2 a.m. in the morning to bring you chocolate and flowers. This person is there to do some kind of harm. And if you need to protect and defend yourself or the people that are in your home, and you needed to do some harm in order to protect yourself, then you're living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, this being who you are and the beings who are in your home. The Buddha is not teaching to preserve life at all costs. He's teaching you to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. So in that situation where someone's breaking in, I would advise somebody and guide somebody, if they can, to just get out of the house and call the police. They have the tools, the equipment, the training to be able to handle something like that. But in some situations, you might be backed up into a corner and needing to make a decision of what you do in the situation. And what I would suggest that you do is cause the least amount of harm to be able to resolve the situation if you can. So that might mean if someone has a piece of wood or a baseball bat, then maybe you get a bigger baseball bat or a bigger piece of wood, and you try to, cause the least amount of harm as possible to stop this from occurring. And if this being ends up getting harmed or even killed in the process, this is their Kamma. They chose to come into the home, break in at 2 a.m. in the morning, and now cause harm to the beings that are in that home. And if harm comes to them, that's a result of their decisions. That's the cause and effect. You're protecting this being who you are and the beings that are in your home. So the Buddha is not saying preserve all life at all costs. He's saying to live compassionate for the welfare of all living beings. And what you'll find is in a situation like this, if you can remain calm without fear, which you can ultimately get to if you train your mind on the path to enlightenment, then you can make wise decisions where your mind is steady and stable, and those wise decisions, taking in all the variables, can then produce wholesome results. Whereas if your mind's all shaken up and unsteady, you might make unwise decisions that produce unwholesome results. Then you might look at something called a DNR, or a do not resuscitate. There are some countries that have a legal document that you can put in place that essentially says that if you die, don't bring you back to life using medical technology, that you're not interested in using medical technology in order to bring you back to life. Well, in this situation, you've already died, and you're just asking not to use medical technology in order to bring you back to life. This isn't an intentional killing. You haven't killed yourself and then asking not to be brought back to life. You're just saying, hey, if this being experiences death, don't use this medical technology to bring me back to life. So in this case, you're comfortable with death. And it's not something that you have to do. It's not something you're required to do. But if you decide to do something like this, you're still practicing this precept because you haven't created an intentional killing. You haven't killed yourself. You're just asking not to be brought back to life. Then some other things you might decide to look at is the consumption of animal products. That if you consume animal products, there's been a death in order for this to occur potentially, in order to consume things like meat, for example. You might need to ask yourself, are you living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings if you choose to eat meat? Because human beings, we've eaten meat for a really long period of time. And when we're ingesting meat, we can see through scientific research that there's a certain amount of harm that's being caused to our own physical body through certain sicknesses and illnesses that we get as a result of this. We can even see that there's certain drugs and hormones and toxins in the meat that when we eat the flesh, that it's producing a certain condition in the mind that is affecting us in unwholesome ways. They've actually taken wild fish out of clean rivers in places like the USA that are supposed to have very clean running water, and they've tested the flesh and they found things like cocaine and antidepressants and other drugs and toxins and hormones that are in the fish, and they're not supposed to be there because this is supposed to be a very clean waterway. But because human beings have put these types of substances into the water table, it's polluted the water, and now the animal, the fish, has absorbed this into their body, and now if we eat this fish, and we've killed this fish in order to eat it, now we're ingesting those substances. So it's affecting the health of the body and affecting the health of the mind. So you might decide at some point to move to a plant-based food supply that will help you to make a wiser choice to reside more healthy and not have this effect to the mind. And if you choose to do that, or when you choose to do that, is a choice for you to make. It's something that you might decide to look at. And if you decide to gradually move away from animal products to plant-based food supply, you'll notice the improvement to the condition of the body and the condition of the mind, because you won't be ingesting these substances any longer. So these are all things that you can look at, and there's others, I'm sure, that you might encounter on a day-to-day basis that you can look about applying this particular precept. And where you need help, you're always welcome to reach out to me through the Facebook group, through asking questions in classes, through sending private messages, or through scheduling personal guidance. Here today, you're welcome to ask any and all questions as we go through our class. I'm going to pause here and see what questions you guys might have about the first precept. So you can ask questions through Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can put your question into Zoom by raising your hand electronically and ask any questions or follow-up questions directly. So I see Max has his hand up, so he might have a question or some questions from other people. If you'd like to go ahead and ask your question, Max, you're welcome to.
Yes, I had a question over the DNR. So even if you had a minor, somewhat minor, but maybe life-threatening injury or something like that, you don't want any medical, I guess there's like maybe a fine line or something like that with having a DNR where you could, maybe quote unquote easily be saved, or your life be saved or whatnot through medical intervention. You don't want any medical intervention with, if you're maybe potentially you could live, but I guess I don't know how to ask the question.
Yeah, so what a DNR is it's saying don't resuscitate this being. That if this being has met with death, meaning, the brain is not working necessarily, the heart's not working, the lungs aren't working, this being has died, an individual saying, don't bring me back to life. And I haven't done a DNR ever, but students have asked this question before, so that's why I included in the teachings that I share to help people understand it, that I imagine there's a certain level of detail in there that somebody can say, like certain interventions. It's probably not just like one sentence, right? It's probably like multiple pages that people are kind of making decisions about, okay, if these types of things happen, don't bring me back to life. But if these kinds of things happen, use technology to bring me back. And usually this is for an individual to inform their family, because it's the family that's making the decisions. And then the family has the legal backing, and they have the consent of the individual to be able to make a decision based on what they are choosing for themselves. When they're conscious, when they're alive, when they're able to make a certain decision, they're putting this document in place so that their family members can then understand what their goals and decisions are. So a DNR is going to have certain details that delineate in what situations would they potentially like to be resuscitated and what situations would they not like to be resuscitated.
Okay, I guess I have another question that would be along these lines. So in the past, like when I get my driver's license or whatever, I can sign up for donating my organs or whatever in case I, let's say got into a bad car accident or something like that. But like my mother-in-law said that, once you sign up for that, it's like, even if you could be saved or whatnot, they, this company that does, the whatever harvesting of your organs or whatever, even if you can be saved, they want your organs anyway. So they kind of end your life early or whatever, just to get you the organs or whatnot. So I wasn't sure on, I'm sorry, my kids are being a little bit rowdy.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I wasn't sure on, donating my, if this company is wanting to end my life prematurely, that they have maybe a craving for the organs, versus I could be saved and I could be saved and I could be, I could survive an accident or something, versus them taking my organs prematurely, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know that to be true, Max. From what I understand is medical professionals are practicing a certain teaching, and I don't know how to articulate it, but I know that they're practicing this teaching and this guidance or this oath, that they're doing what's in the best interest for the patient that's there. So I don't think that people are going to, naturally just not save you if they can in order to harvest your organs. I don't think that that's a practice, at least that exists in most modern countries that are practicing organ donation, in places that are practicing this oath that doctors and nurses and other medical professionals practice, that their interest is, if they can bring you back to life or they can save your life, that they're going to do that. They're not going to just let you die in order to harvest your organs for somebody else. I know that that's kind of something that some people think about and talk about, but I don't see any evidence of that based on what I see going on in the world. But that's something that, you would need to make a decision on your own of whether or not you'd like to donate your organs or not at the time of death, if they're able to be donated.
Okay, thank you, sir. Samantha has a question, and then also we've got a couple people just saying hello and showing respect for you on other social media platforms.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you, Max. Samantha, if you'd like to ask your question, go ahead. You'll just need to unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay. Thank you, Dave. I had a question about also the euthanasia of human and animals. So I thought that I had a pretty good concept of that. And then when I moved to Thailand, I've found that perhaps medical professionals, as well as, say, veterinarians, are seemingly more hesitant to do euthanasia. And I've asked a couple of people, and the response I got both times was that people who practice Buddhism don't believe in euthanasia because you're, quote unquote, or this is what it was inferred, that you're interfering with someone's Kamma. Mm-hmm. So I know that, not everyone follows and practices the original teachings and may have polluted or diluted what its intentions were. But I was just wondering if euthanasia, given with compassion and for the welfare of a being to eliminate suffering, is a valid reason, or if there is such a thing as interfering with someone's Kamma.
Yeah, so if an individual chooses to euthanize an animal, for example, this is intentionally causing the death of that animal. And animals can't get to enlightenment. They need to be able to be reborn into a human life or a heavenly existence in order to have the opportunity to experience enlightenment and attain enlightenment. So if an animal, for example, has cancer, and the person who is owning the animal is struggling with this, oftentimes an individual being attached to their animal, they can have painful feelings like sadness or other feelings like grief, knowing that this animal is slowly dying, and they're not necessarily comfortable with allowing that to occur. So someone might feel like they're doing euthanasia and that's a compassionate killing. But in reality, it's not compassion at all, because this animal, the more of its Kamma that it lives out, the more likely it will be to be able to get to an improved rebirth. Whereas if we kill it prematurely, you're experiencing the unwholesome results of that, because now you're choosing to kill this being. Whereas if we just let it live out its life, whether it's 6 months, a year, 3 years, or what have you, and help it to be as comfortable as possible as it's nearing its end of life, it's being able to experience the full breadth of its Kamma in that existence as an animal, and then it's more likely to get to an improved rebirth in its next life. So if you understand what the real problem is that this being is having, is it's not the cancer. The cancer is not the real problem. That's just impermanence. That this being of a dog or a cat, it can't be permanently healthy. It's not possible. The cancer is just impermanence. The real problem that this being is experiencing is that it's stuck in the cycle of rebirth, and the best way to help it get out of this cycle is to live out as much of its Kamma as possible, so that then it can get to this improved rebirth. And if you choose to euthanize it or kill it prematurely, then you're not allowing it to do that. And that's actually not compassionate. That's the opposite of that. So that's why individuals here in Thailand very rarely, if ever, use euthanasia. It's here, and they of course probably use it occasionally for here and there, but it's not used as widely as other places in the world. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So let's move on to the next precept, which is the second precept. And again, I'm going to do the same thing here, which is share with you the words of the Buddha, and then we'll break it down and look at it and kind of talk about different examples. And then you guys are welcome to ask any questions that you like as we go. So here's the original words of the Buddha. Abandoning the taking of what is not given, living purely, accepting what is given, awaiting what is given, without stealing. So of course, the Buddha here is teaching that we shouldn't steal, that it would be unwise to steal. And keep in mind, by the way, that these precepts, what they're designed to do, and the whole path to enlightenment, is to help you eliminate the pollutions of mind, the 10 fetters, these individual pollutions that are in the mind that are hindering an individual from getting to the enlightened mental state. A fetter is like a shackle around the ankle, and there's a chain and a ball that's keeping you trapped in the unenlightened state. So you need to eliminate these pollutions of mind, and getting wisdom on the natural law of Kamma is helping you to do that, but it's also helping you to eliminate certain things like craving or ill will. So like that first precept that we were just talking about, that one's to help you eliminate anger, hatred, ill will, and those lesser versions, because in order to kill another living being intentionally, there needs to be a certain amount of ill will in the mind in order for that to occur. Here with the second precept, this is helping you to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, because with stealing, you might have a certain desire, a longing, a yearning. You're wanting a certain material object and you can't afford it. You haven't done the work to be able to afford to purchase it, so you might decide to go out and steal this particular item. And in this situation, your craving, your desire, your attachment, your longing, yearning is going to produce unwise decisions that are then going to produce unwholesome results. So if you chose to steal something, this is causing harm to another individual, and now that harm is going to come back to you. So if I stole somebody's car, for example, they're not going to be able to go to work and make an income. They're not going to be able to take their children to school if they have children. They're not going to be able to go to the grocery store and get food and things like this. So by you choosing to steal someone's car or any other product that they might have or any other material possession, there's a certain harm that they're incurring because they worked a certain amount of time, effort, and energy to be able to acquire that thing, and that thing is providing them some kind of benefit. So now if I took it, now they're not going to be able to experience that benefit. And now, because I've now caused this harm can come to me. I might get injured and beat up. I can get murdered for this. If somebody finds out that I stole from them, that person might end up deciding to murder me. I might go to jail if I get arrested or things like this. People can steal from me because if I'm making decisions to steal, there's probably people around me that are maybe doing those same kinds of things, and now people would steal from me. So by cleaning up your practice to not steal, you're not causing harm to others, and harm won't come back to you as a result of that. But then you can look at other aspects of this precept too, because the Buddha is not just saying that you should refrain or abandon stealing. Instead, he's sharing this other details of this precept. So you might think about any kind of assumptions that you're making of taking things or using things in a situation that doesn't actually belong to you. And this will help to protect you if you understand this. So let's just say the example of, like, maybe you're in a college class and you're a student and you show up to the class with a certain assignment or a certain paper that you need to hand in to the professor. And the professor is outside of the room and you see a stapler on their desk and you just assume that you can use it and you pick it up and start stapling your paper. As the professor walks in, they see you stapling the paper and now they're like, hey, what are you doing? Why are you using my stapler? And they get kind of angry because maybe they're attached to their stapler. Well, of course, they're causing their anger because of that. But is it really a wise decision for you to use something that doesn't belong to you? Because in this situation, if the professor is attached to their stapler and they don't want you to use the stapler, they now maybe are angry. And then with their wrong view that they think you're causing their anger, they might give you a bad grade on that paper, or they might give you a bad grade in the entire class, and you actually might fail the class as a result of this decision that was unwise. Instead, it would be wiser to ask the professor, do you mind if I use your stapler, or can I use your stapler? And if they say yes, then okay, they've given you approval and you can use it. You haven't assumed that you can take this stapler or use it. And if they say no, that you can't use it, then maybe you ask another classmate, or maybe there's another professor in another classroom that would let you use their stapler, or maybe you can go buy one and use it for yourself. But if you just assume that things can be used or can be taken, you might find yourself in a situation where somebody is attached to that object, and now with their wrong view and they're getting angry and frustrated, they're attributing that to you, and now you'll find yourself in a difficult situation. So in addition to helping you eliminate craving, desire, attachment with this precept, the Buddha is also helping to protect you against any unwise decisions that you might make like this that could potentially end up in a situation where you're experiencing some unwholesome result. Then you might think about accepting what is given. Here you can see the words of the Buddha where he's saying accepting what is given. What he's describing here is that people are going to practice generosity with you. They're going to be giving and sharing things, maybe their time, their effort, their energy, their resources, and things of this nature. And as you're experiencing this, if you just said, no, no, I don't want that, I don't want that, I don't want that, over time, you're going to see that less and less people are going to be interested in practicing generosity with you because they're interested in sharing, and now you're kind of shutting that down. Well, practicing generosity is really helpful for any and all beings to practice generosity. It helps to eliminate the selfishness, that when you're sharing your time, your effort, your energy, and your resources in any given situation, and you don't have any expectation of anything in return, this is helping you to eliminate craving, desire, attachment as you practice generosity. So if somebody's practicing generosity with you and you shut that down, you're inhibiting them from being able to enhance their mind through practicing generosity. So in situations where people are offering you certain time, effort, energy, and resources, in the vast majority of situations, you're probably going to be interested in accepting what is given. So if grandma offers you that sweater that maybe you look at and you're like, I know I'm never going to wear that sweater ever, it would be wise to just accept that offering from grandma because it's helping her to practice generosity. And now what you might choose to do is then practice generosity where you give it to somebody else. And it might go through 3, 4, 5, 10 different hands before it meets with a final individual who decides this is the best sweater they've ever seen, and they might decide to wear that and they enjoy that they have this. But in the meantime, there's been 6 or 8 or 10 different people that have practiced generosity and helped to enhance their mind. And if grandma gets angry because you've given her gift to somebody else, this is grandma's craving, desire, attachment that's causing her anger. Because the other option would be to put it in the closet and it just sits there for 20 years and 30 years and deteriorates, and the resources that went into producing that sweater get completely wasted. So if grandma gets angry because you've now given the gift to somebody else, grandma's causing that anger herself. In some cultures, they think that this is unwise. They call it re-gifting and that this is harmful. But this isn't harmful. It's just practicing generosity. And if somebody gives a gift with an expectation that you're going to absolutely use it, this is not pure generosity, and any kind of discontent feelings or painful feelings that they experience, they're causing that themselves. You haven't actually caused it. But remember, these teachings, they're not black and white. So it's not that the Buddha is sharing to always accept what is given. Because if somebody offered you cocaine or heroin or crystal methamphetamine or a stolen car or something like this, it would be unwise to accept that. So you need to look at each situation and decide whether it's wise or unwise for you to accept this gift. And in situations where somebody's offering you something that is going to either cause them harm, cause you harm, or cause somebody else harm, then it would be unwise to accept this. And cocaine, heroin, crystal methamphetamine is causing harm, or a stolen car is causing harm. So you might be interested to not accept that. So this is where you need to have the wisdom of this precept and then apply it with the unique variables in any given situation. And then the other part of this precept, the Buddha is talking about awaiting what is given. What this is about is not putting your expectations on others to give you things. Whereas if you have an expectation that you want this particular thing from somebody and you tell this person, get me this or get me that, maybe you have a partner or a family member who's going on a business trip and you kind of burden them with certain expectations that you have. And now they go around, trying to figure out how to get you this gift. And now they may be putting pressure on themselves to find you this gift. And if they bring it back, maybe you get these conditioned pleasant feelings of happiness or excitement. But if they don't bring you what you want, now you're angry or frustrated or irritated, and it can cause difficulties in your relationship. So if you just await what is given, not having an expectation that somebody will give you something, but just accept what is given and await what is given, then you can reside peaceful and joyful in your relationships. And the people who you're interacting with can do the same, because you're not putting expectations on them that you want any one particular thing or another. So this is some aspects of this precept that you can think about and consider as you're looking to practice it. Let me see what questions you guys have. Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand electronically in Zoom and ask any questions or follow-up questions directly. So I see a hand up by Max and Samantha. I'm not sure, Samantha, if that's your question from last time or if you still have a question on this one. Okay, there you go. So Max, if you'd like to go ahead and ask your question, go for it.
Yes, teacher. So I'm trying to teach my kids basically not how to not steal. And do you have any suggestions of kind of teaching kids to not take things without not taking things without asking?
Yeah, whenever you're teaching somebody, it's always helpful to give them examples and even ask questions of them related to their own life so that they can then give you the answer. They can arise the wisdom, because oftentimes human beings have the wisdom in their mind. It's just that their mind being clouded with craving, anger, and ignorance, it's hard for them to kind of bring that wisdom forward. So like you might ask a child, like if they're playing with a toy and you're trying to teach them about not taking things, and they're playing with some toy and you know that they're very fond of this toy, you can ask the child, like, how would you feel if I just took that from you? Would that be wise of me if I just took it from you? How would that make you feel? And they will say, oh, I wouldn't like that. I'd be angry. I'd be frustrated. You can say, well, how do you think people feel if you take something from them? How would it make them feel, right? So you can kind of help them reflect on a situation by asking them questions and kind of sitting down on the floor with them and playing with them with their toys and stuff. And you're going to need to ask them these kinds of things and help them see these kinds of things multiple times. It's not like you can just teach them once and they got it, particularly the age of your children. I think your children are like 4 or 5 or 6 max. Even when they're like, 10 and 12, you're going to be teaching them things multiple times over and over and over again that they need to revisit to be able to really soak into the mind. So you can teach them like that one-on-one related to their own toys. Or like say you guys are watching a movie or a cartoon or something like this, and in the cartoon, maybe somebody steals something from somebody and then the other character, has some problems with that. If you're watching something that you can pause, you can actually pause it and ask your children, like, do you see what just happened? Like, what just happened? Snoopy, did this, or Mickey Mouse did this, or some other character. Why is it that this particular, character got really angry and frustrated? Why are they fighting? And you can kind of help them see it through their own eyes and through material that they actually are digesting and understand.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I typically don't. I probably need to ask them more questions like that instead of just giving a teaching or whatnot. So thank you for that. But there's also a question coming through on Facebook. It says, when practicing generosity to let go of the clinging or attachment, should we tell our mind to let go of that attachment while giving? Or would that be an attachment in itself of wanting to let go attachment?
Yeah, so if you understand what craving, desire, attachment is, these wants and expectations, this is the mental longing and strong eagerness, the wanting something so strongly, right? And you're not interested in having that about anything, even something wholesome. If you're craving, desiring, attached, it's going to produce discontent feelings at some point. If you get what you want, you'll get pleasant feelings like happiness, excitement in others. And if you don't get what you want, you'll get that sadness or anger. So if you're giving a certain gift and you're practicing generosity, what the Buddha teaches is that before you give, your mind should be joyful, that you should have joy that you're making this gift. And then while you're giving, your mind should be calm and confident while you're actually in the act of giving. And then after giving, your mind should also be joyful. So essentially, if you've put some thought into the gift that you're giving, you should be able to maintain your joy all the way through to the end, that you don't have remorse when you get to the end, like, oh, I gave too much, or oh, I didn't give enough. And while you're giving, your mind should be calm and confident. So if you're giving a gift and you're thinking in your mind to let go, this can be helpful. You can kind of talk to the mind a little bit. You can do this in daily life. Like say you're driving down the road and somebody cuts you off in traffic and you notice that there's starting to be this frustration that arises. You can train your mind, let go. Let go, let go, right? No need to hold on. This isn't your lane. It doesn't belong to you. Maybe you just let your foot off the accelerator, or you let the gas out a little bit so that the other person has a little bit more space, and then you can just reside peaceful and joyful as a result. So there's no harm in telling the mind to let go, but you're not interested in wanting that or longing or yearning for it, but instead have a goal, objective, or interest that you're going to need to practice a significant amount of generosity throughout your life in order to enhance the mind and improve this quality of mind, to eliminate selfishness. That's what the generosity is there for you, because the Buddha describes selfishness like a stain that stains the mind. And as long as there's the stain of selfishness in the mind, you're holding on. And this is because of craving, desire, attachment. And by you practicing generosity of your time, effort, energy, and resources, you're training your mind to let go and to not have selfishness, to be able to recognize this interconnectivity between all beings, that we're all interconnected, and that you're not just doing certain tasks or certain efforts just for your own selfish desires, that you are willing to share with other beings. So you can tell your mind to let go, but just do it without craving, desire, attachment, understanding that your mind needs this gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress to easily be able to let go. That it's not going to just be one gift and your mind immediately lets go. You're going to need to practice sharing your time, effort, energy, and resources in multiple situations without any expectation of anything in return. And you got to be really attentive to the mind, because sometimes it can have an expectation that you don't even realize. I remember in the past where I used to sometimes open doors for people, and I would have the expectation that they would say thank you, and I would stand there holding the door thinking that I'm doing a wonderful thing, and then when they didn't say thank you, I'll get frustrated and angry, right? And this was because the mind had an expectation that they would do something. There was still an expectation there, even just hearing a thank you. So even when you do something as simple as holding a door for somebody, you need to not even have the expectation that they will say thank you to you, that you're just doing this sharing of your time, effort, energy, and resources because it's a wise decision and it's helping enhance your mind.
Thank you, sir. I believe that's all the questions we have at this time.
Okay, so I'll go on to the next precept, which is the third one. And I'm going to, again, share the words of the Buddha, and then we'll talk about it and help you understand various ways to apply this in your life. And then you guys can ask questions as you go. So this one, the Buddha says, abandoning unchastity, abandoning sexual relations with women, men who are protected by their mother, father, mother and father, brother, sister, or relatives, who are protected by teachings, who have a husband, wife, or partner, whose violation entails a penalty, or even with one who has been garlanded by a man, woman, or partner as a sign of engagement. So this one is usually translated as no sexual misconduct. Well, the Buddha is describing to you the natural law of Kamma in terms of how you can cause harm or not cause harm through your sexual activity. He's not just giving you this blanket statement of no sexual misconduct. He's actually showing you through his words this illuminating language of how you can potentially cause harm. And now, as you learn it, you can then reflect on it and then practice it and see the truth for yourself. So this part of the precept where he's saying abandoning sexual relations with women, men who are protected by their mother, and father, brother, sister, or relative. This would be to have sex with a minor. If you were having sex with a minor, this would cause harm because that minor is getting guidance from their parents and their mind isn't yet fully developed, and having sexual contact is a very close, intimate contact that is going to be very impactful in this person's life, and it will affect them for a long-term period. So if you chose to have sex, it would be wise to have sex with people who aren't a minor. In most places in the world, it's also illegal for the human laws to have sex with a minor. But there are some places in the world where it's not illegal. They can actually have sex through the human laws with minors. But here you can see through the natural law of Kamma that if you have sex with minors, it's going to degrade their mind and it's going to affect the family. And this can put a burden on society and affect society in unwholesome ways and in negative ways. So it would be wise to have a partner who's of an age that they are able to now be independent. They're no longer being guided by their mother, father, or their other relatives, and that they're able to make this decision to actually have sex. Then notice this part where the Buddha says, whose violation entails a penalty. This is sex without consent, that if you were to rape somebody or you were forcibly having sex with somebody or sex without consent, this is having sex that is going to entail a penalty. So if you cause harm to somebody through having forcible sex, you can get injured, you can get murdered, you can go to jail in a lot of places. This is going to cause harm in your life because you're causing harm to others through the decision of forcibly having sex. This part where the Buddha says abandoning unchastity, this is having sex with multiple partners. What chastity is chastity would be like having sex with nobody at all, that you're not having sex at all. In medieval times, there were men who created these chastity belts for their daughter where they would put these metal underwear that has a lock, essentially, is literally metal, that it was like a device that went around their body to ensure that they weren't able to have sex. And it was only the father that had the key to this. So chastity or a chastity belt would be to not have sex with anybody at all. So unchastity would be to have sex with lots and lots and lots and lots of people. And if you're having sex with lots and lots of people, this is going to cause harm in your relationships and to yourself as well, because this is why we have sexually transmitted diseases. This is the result of having sex with multiple partners, that you can experience these sexually transmitted diseases. So it would be wise to have a loyal, loving, consenting relationship with having sex with just one person at a time. And then when that relationship is over and you guys have ended the relationship, if you move on to another partner, then you're moving on to another partner and you're just having sex with that one person at a time. There are some cultures that they might actually meet a certain partner and then they talk to their family and ask if that partner can move in because you're going to have a relationship and maybe get married and things like this. And now your parents have accepted that relationship or your family members have accepted that relationship, and now you're moving in together in order to start your life together. And you're maybe doing this in order to save money to then be able to purchase your own home or rent your own home to be able to start your life together. And in this situation, your relatives have accepted the relationship. So in this situation, they've accepted the relationship, so you're actually practicing this precept. And they understand that there may be sexual contact as part of that. But both of you guys are of an age that you've decided that you are able to then have a relationship, and you've decided that this is something that you're both entering at your own free will. Then you might notice that this part where the Buddha says, who are protected by teachings. What this is referring to is people who have decided to remain celibate, that there are certain people on the path to enlightenment or certain people in life in various spiritual traditions or other aspects or for other reasons that they might have decided to remain celibate and no longer have sex at all. And in this situation, if somebody's choosing to let go of sexual contact, they're at a certain point in their practice that they're choosing to do that, and it's going to help them to get closer and closer to enlightenment because it's helping them to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. So when or if you ever choose to eliminate sexual contact is your choice. You don't need to run out and do that today or tomorrow, but at some point you might decide that that's something that you would like to do. And if you've decided to do that and somebody tried to lure you away from that, it would actually cause harm because it would hinder you from being able to get to enlightenment. Of course, it's your decision to do that, but you should decide if you're going to have sex with individuals who are choosing to have sex. In places like Thailand and other places, there's ways to determine whether somebody's choosing to have sex or not based on the clothing or based on certain things that they wear. So here in Thailand, if an ordained practitioner is wearing a robe, then you know that, okay, they're deciding to remain celibate and it would be unwise to have sex with that person. There's even people who live a household life who wear all white, and this is an indication to other people that, okay, I'm choosing to not have sex. So that way, if you're going to choose to have sex, you can find a partner who's interested in having sex, and then you can more readily practice this teaching of ensuring that you're not having sex with someone who's choosing to remain celibate. You might also look at having sex with people who are already committed in other relationships. If you're a single person and you're choosing to have sex with somebody who's in a relationship, this is causing harm in that situation, and harm can easily come to you. You can get beat up, you can get injured, you can get murdered, you can get sexually transmitted diseases, you can get all kinds of harm coming to you if you choose to have sex with someone who's already in a relationship. Or if you're in a committed relationship and you choose to go outside of your relationship, those same things can occur. You can get beat up, you can get injured, murdered, you can get sexually transmitted diseases. This relationship can dissolve and you can cause harm to your relationship if you choose to go outside your relationship. So it's wise to have relationships and have sex in a loyal, loving, consenting relationship where you both are deciding to be loyal to each other and not go outside your relationship. This is actually going to ensure that you're not causing harm and that you guys can have this loyal, loving, consenting relationship. And then you might look at things like sex with people who are human trafficked. In a situation where someone's being human trafficked, they might be forced to have sex with other individuals, and they're doing this maybe for money or some other reason that they're being forced to have sex with individuals. And if you're choosing to do that, you're entering into an environment where, again, you can get beat up, injured, murdered. Maybe there's people there that have weapons or drugs, or maybe they're robbing you and stealing from you. It would be unwise to go into an environment like that where people are being human trafficked, including things like paid sexual services. Even if the person is choosing to do this at their own choice and they're offering paid sexual services, you're entering into an environment where people oftentimes are getting beat up, injured, murdered. People can rob you and steal from you in these kinds of situations. So it would be very unwise to go into an environment where there's paid sexual services. And again, there's even sexually transmitted diseases in these situations because individuals are having sex with multiple people. So it would be unwise for the sex worker themselves, and it would be unwise for anybody who's choosing to be a customer in that environment as well. Then you notice here that the Buddha doesn't talk anything about same-gender relationships when he's talking about having sex and what would be harmful, because there's no harm in two individuals choosing to have sex with each other who are of the same gender. If you're in a loyal, loving, consenting relationship and one person is a male and one person is a female, you're not causing harm to anybody because you're in a loyal, loving, consenting relationship. And if there's two males that are choosing to have sex together, they're in a loyal, loving, consenting relationship with each other. They haven't caused harm to each other or to other people because they're in a loyal, loving, consenting relationship. And the same thing with two females. They're not causing harm to each other either because they're in a loyal, loving, consenting relationship. So there might be people that think that same-gender relationships are somehow causing harm, but there's no harm in their sexual activity. And if you understand the teachings of the Buddha, then you understand why he didn't include this in this particular teaching, because his teachings are all about not causing harm to others. That if you cause harm to other beings, harm's going to come to you. So in a loyal, loving, consenting relationship, no matter what the gender is, you're not actually causing harm to any other being, so therefore harm isn't going to come to you. And if you understand other aspects of his teachings, then you understand that because of the universal truth of impermanence that we can all independently verify, that it's not possible for all men to be interested in having sex with a woman. And it's not possible for all women to be interested in having sex with a male. If this was true, then that would be permanence. And we understand the universal truth of impermanence, that this body is constantly changing, the weather is constantly changing, it's not fixed, it's not permanent, your bank account is constantly changing, your relationships are constantly changing, that there's this universal truth of impermanence, that things are constantly changing, there's not this permanent fixed state. So if every single male was interested in having sex with a female, and every female was interested in having sex with a male, that would be permanence. But we understand that that doesn't exist, that there's this universal truth of impermanence. So that's why not every male is interested in having sex with a female. Not every female is interested in having sex with a male. So we can see very clearly that the Buddha didn't include this in this precept, because if you understand the natural law of Kamma, of cause and effect, there is no harm here. And it would be impossible for every male or female to be interested in having sex with the opposite gender. So if you're a same gender person who prefers same gender relationships, or you know other people that do, they're not causing any harm anywhere, and that's why they can reside in their relationship with peace and joy. Now, there might be other people outside the relationship that have a craving, a longing, a yearning for every male to have sex with a female and every female to have sex with a male. They might get angry, they might get frustrated and hateful that they see somebody that's having a same gender relationship, but they're causing that themselves. It's not the same gender couple that is causing that anger and hatred. That individual is causing it themselves through their own craving, desire, attachment. Then you can understand things like transgender individuals, because the Buddha talks about these things in his teachings. If you explore his teachings deeply enough, you can see where he talks about males who don't identify with masculine qualities and females who don't identify with feminine qualities. So he was aware of these things because they existed during his lifetime as well, because it's the natural laws of existence. Not every male or female is going to be born into a certain body and identify with that same gender. So if an individual is born into a body that has male sexual organs, their mind may identify as a female. And then an individual can be born into a female gendered body that has female sexual organs, and their mind can identify as a male, because the body is one thing and the mind is something completely different. And these two things are coming together for this existence, but you can have a body that's of one gender with one type of sexual organs, and the mind can identify with a completely different gender. This is completely normal if you understand the universal truth of impermanence and you understand the cycle of rebirth, that we've all been different genders and different times in our past. So now that we're born into this life, the potential can occur where the body is of one gender and the mind is identifying as another. So maybe in this life, this mind and this body is identifying with being a male, but in a previous life, in multiple previous lives, you could have been a female at different times. So there's the potential that as the mind comes into this new life, that the mind can end up in a body that has male sexual organs, but the mind identifies as a female, and then vice versa, a female sexual organs with a male mind. So this is explained and understandable through all the teachings of the Buddha, and this is why you don't see this included in this particular teaching, because it's explained and understandable through these natural laws, in that an individual who has a same-sex partner or same-gender partner, or someone who is a transgender individual, they're not causing harm to anybody. If other people are getting angry and hostile and bitter because of this, they're causing their own anger and bitterness due to their cravings, desires, attachments. Their mind doesn't understand the universal truth of impermanence, and they don't understand the cycle of rebirth, that these things are completely normal. Then you might look at something like masturbation, that sometimes people are taught that, this is all wrong and that you should never masturbate and it would be very unwise to do so. Well, there's a certain gray area here that you need to be aware of as it relates to something like masturbation. Remember, the Buddha is teaching about causing harm, that if you cause harm, harm's going to come back to you. Well, if you're masturbating, you're only involving one individual. You're only involving yourself. You're not causing harm to others by choosing to masturbate. But you need to look at your masturbation and see if you're using masturbation, are you using it in a wise way or are you using it in an unwise way? Let's just say that you have several boyfriends or girlfriends and you're learning about these teachings and you realize it's unwise to have 3, 4, 5, 8, 10 different partners. And now you decide you like to have just one partner and you bring your practice down to just having one partner. But you have a lot of craving for sex in your mind after having been in all these different relationships at the same time. And now you might decide to use a bit of masturbation to drop your sexual craving down so that now you can have sex with just one partner. This is very wise. It will actually help you. The masturbation is helping you in this situation to temper your sexual craving and bring it down. Or let's just say somebody was interested in going out and raping somebody and having forcible sex, but they use masturbation instead in order to satisfy the mind and the body, and now they choose to not rape because they've been masturbating. So this can actually be helpful in those situations if you're using it for those situations. But also masturbation can be used excessively. If you're masturbating 10, 15, 20 times a day, this can actually cause harm to your own mind. So you'd like to throttle that back and get to a point where you're not doing it excessively. So if you need to use some masturbation here and there in order to throttle your sexual craving, this can actually be helpful. If you choose at some point to eliminate sexual contact 100%, you might need to use some masturbation in that period of time as you're diminishing your sexual craving. So you need to look at how you're using masturbation and determine whether you're working towards a wise goal that's going to produce wholesome results, or are you doing something unwise. Then there's things like sex with animals. There's no way that an animal can actually provide us consent to have sex with it. So therefore, in this situation, I imagine if somebody was trying to do this, that there's certain injuries that would occur. There could be potentially certain illnesses and diseases that could be contracted because of that. This is an area where it's black and white. It's very clear that having sex with an animal would be unwise. So I wouldn't suggest that anybody choose to do that. Then you might look at things like pornography. With pornography, the mind is going into this fantasy world and indulging in certain content to live out certain sexual fantasies with pornography. In this situation, what the individual has is they have craving for intimate contact. And I would encourage you to go in that direction to find a partner where you can actually have certain sexual contact. When you go into any kind of pornography and into any kind of fantasy world, the deeper you get into that, the harder it is to come out. And even when you come out of that and you start having sexual contact with an actual partner, you might notice that the encounters aren't as satisfying as they once were when the mind was in this fantasy world. So in this situation, if you're indulging in pornography, it would be good to come out of that and go towards having an actual partner. Because not only is your mind potentially becoming diluted through going into this fantasy world, but you're also supporting a certain amount of unchastity where individuals are maybe being paid to have sex with multiple people, and now you're digesting that content and it's affecting the condition of your mind, and it's also supporting an environment where people are now having sex with multiple partners and getting paid for that based on your indulgence in this pornography. So these are all things that you can be thinking about as it relates to this practice. And if you're doing any of these things now, you can gradually work towards eliminating them through certain various practices and tools and techniques to help you to be able to reduce or eliminate your sexual contact, and then practice in a way that is harmless. So if you're going to have sex, go ahead, do whatever you're going to do and enjoy whatever you're going to do. But following this precept, you can see that the Buddha is helping you to ensure you're not causing harm to others, so harm doesn't come back to you. So let me see if you guys have any questions on this particular precept. Again, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Max, I see you have a hand up. If you'd like to go ahead, you're welcome to.
Yes, Mayuli has a question about a previous precept, if that's okay.
Sure.
They say, sorry I came in late. Not sure if you already went over the precept of non-harming killing. I have a question regarding that precept. I have so many flies in my house, and I'm catching each catch and freeing them outside. While catching them, I can potentially hurt them. Am I causing harm?
So in this situation, you would like to cause as least amount of harm as possible. And you know that flies carry certain diseases and illnesses. And if you allowed them in your house, this could cause you and the people that live there, it can cause disease or illness. So trying to get them out is ideal, right? Without killing them if you can. Of course, you can unintentionally cause harm. In order to produce Kamma, you need to have intention behind it. So like say you're walking down the street, and as you were walking down the street, there was an ant that came under your foot and you didn't know it, and you crushed the ant and it got killed. In this situation, you're not producing any unwholesome Kamma because you haven't intentionally killed that being. Because remember, this particular precept is to help you eliminate anger, hatred, ill will, and all those lesser versions. So just walking down the street and an ant happens to be under your foot and it gets killed, you haven't intentionally killed that being. You haven't used any anger, hatred, and ill will to intentionally kill that being, and that's why no unwholesome results come back to you. But in a situation, if you're walking down the street and you were forcibly stomping and crushing and trying to kill insects along the way, there's a certain amount of anger, hatred, and ill will that needs to be in the mind in order for this to occur. And this is going to produce unwholesome results, not only in that situation, but that anger, hatred, ill will is coming out in other situations and other relationships that you have, and it's going to produce unwholesome results for you. So if in this situation where you're trying to get the flies out, and you're doing that with the intention of harmlessness, that you're trying to protect yourself and the others in your house and your dwelling, and you're trying to get them out of the home, and you're doing that with the intention of harmlessness, if you inadvertently harm a fly, then you're not doing that with intention. There's no anger, hatred, and ill will that you're exerting there to produce that. Instead, you're practicing loving kindness and compassion by trying to get the flies out of the home. So in this situation, you're not causing intentional harm, and this is why there's no intentional harm that's going to come back to you. There's no unwholesome results that are going to come back to you because you're not causing intentional harm. Another example that I sometimes use to help you illustrate this is that say your house was being eaten by termites. In this situation, you need to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. And if you allowed the termites to continue to eat the house, this wouldn't be living compassionate for the beings that are in that house. This dwelling's going to fall apart over time. And in this situation, if you would like to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, you might try to do some research to figure out, is there a way to eradicate these termites without killing them? Because that's what you would ultimately like to do, is get rid of these termites so that your home can continue to be safe and protect the beings there, but you're trying to get rid of these beings that you know are causing harm and that are going to destroy the home. Well, what you might come back with in your research is there isn't a way to eradicate the termites from your home without actually killing them. So you might actually need to hire somebody to come take care of this issue. And if these beings, the termites, end up dying in the process, then this is their Kamma, that they're causing harm to the home. And this is one of the problems with the animal world, that once you're reborn in the animal world, it's very hard to get back out of that realm because you need to cause harm in a lot of situations in order to just sustain your life. So the termites don't have the consciousness to understand, let me eat this tree and not eat this house, because they don't have that level of consciousness. Or like a tiger or a lion, they're killing in order to sustain their life. That's how they have to eat. So in the animal realm, they're oftentimes trapped like a prison, that they have to cause harm in order to sustain their life. And this is one of the reasons why animals have to be constantly reborn over and over and over again until they make it to the human realm or to the heavenly realm to be able to get to enlightenment. And all of us at some point have been in these various realms, but now we've made our way into the human realm with the opportunity to get to enlightenment. So in this situation, Mayuli, if you're doing it with the intention of harmlessness and you inadvertently harm a fly, you aren't going to experience unwholesome results there because there's no intention to harm behind that action or that cause. So there's not going to be an unwholesome effect. There's only going to be a wholesome result that you're experiencing because you have wholesome intentions to practice loving kindness and compassion in this situation. You're not making a decision through craving, anger, and ignorance. You're making a decision through generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. So there, it's only going to produce wholesome results for yourself.
Thank you, sir. I believe that is all the questions we have at this time.
Okay, so let's move on to the next one, which is number 4. Here, the Buddha's words are abandoning false speech, refraining from false speech, a truth speaker, one to be relied on, trustworthy, dependable, not a deceiver of the world. So here the Buddha is sharing with you to not lie, that it would be unwise to lie or have false speech, that you should speak the truth. But he's giving you much more detail than what people typically say, which is no lying, right? The Buddha didn't teach that way. He didn't say no lying. This sounds like a rule or a commandment or black and white and things like this. But instead, he's giving you this much more illuminating language, explaining to you that it would be unwise to lie, but he's also explaining to you the reason why. Because you're interested in being a truth speaker, one to be relied on, trustworthy, dependable, not a deceiver of the world. If you've ever done any amount of lying, which we all have done as we grew up as children, we all lied at different times in our life, you understand that it produced unwholesome results in your life. That as you lied, you realized that people didn't trust you and that you weren't dependable. Even in your adult life, if you were doing any lying, you noticed that people discovered your lies and they then didn't trust you and you weren't dependable. And it affected your personal and professional relationships. And also, if you've done any amount of significant lying, you know that your mind was kind of obsessively trying to figure out what did you say to one person versus what did you say to another person? And now your mind has to figure out what did you say to each of these people so that you can keep your lies straight. So you would have a very challenging time to ever get to this peaceful and joyful mental state if your mind is obsessively trying to figure out what you said to one person versus another. Or if you are experiencing these unwholesome results of having lied, that your personal and professional relationships will struggle. So you would like to get to the point where you're only practicing speaking the truth. And the Buddha understood this so closely that he didn't even tell jokes that had lies. And I've included this other teaching here to help you see. He's teaching his son Rahula here. Some people think that the Buddha left his family and he never came back, but he actually came back after 6 years and he spent time with his wife, his mother, his son, his cousins and brother-in-laws and his family. A lot of these people ended up becoming students of his, and they actually got to enlightenment during his lifetime. So here he's teaching his son Rahula and helping him to understand that it would be unwise to tell a lie even as part of a joke. Because if you can imagine this individual who's speaking all this truth and sharing all this truth as he's sharing these natural laws and he's helping his students learn. If in private conversations, if he's telling jokes and he's lying, well, when he's talking in private conversations and he's lying and he's telling jokes, but then in his classes, he's teaching people to speak the truth, people wouldn't know whether or not he's speaking the truth or not. They would be kind of suspicious and they wouldn't have confidence in him that he was teaching the truth during his classes versus when he's talking on the side privately and he's actually lying. So if you could get to a point where you're always telling the truth, that you're not even lying as part of a joke, you'll see that people will see you as being more influential in your conversations, whether personally or professionally. It's a lot more challenging to tell jokes that are truthful. It takes a lot more wisdom to be able to tell jokes in that way, but those jokes are oftentimes a lot more funny. You'll find that people will probably laugh a lot more, and it requires you to be a lot more conscious and a lot more wise. So sometimes when people tell jokes, they tell jokes that are degrading or disparaging, or they tell jokes that are lies. If you can get to a point where you're not telling jokes in that way, that jokes that are uplifting, that are the truth, you'll find that you'll have better results when you're joking with people. So what you're trying to develop here with this precept and also the teachings on right speech that I taught a couple of weeks ago is you're looking to develop barami. This is a Thai word, barami. What this means is the one who people listen to. If you establish barami amongst your various friends and family and professional colleagues and things like this means that you're influential, that you're one who people listen to. And the way that you do that is through practicing wisdom, particularly through your communication or your speech, that your emails, your text messages, your social media posts, your conversations, that you're telling the truth. And the more that you tell the truth and you practice all those factors of right speech, you'll see that slowly but surely you will develop barami, that you will be one who people listen to, that you can be influential and helpful in your community. And this is one of the things that you will need to do to be able to establish that barami, or being one who people listen to. Do you guys have any questions on this precept? You can put it into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. All right, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So I'm going to move on to the 5th precept, which is really important. And of course, all the precepts are really important. But this precept, it's the last one, because if you're actually doing this one, you're more likely to not practice all the others. So be sure that you understand this precept and how to practice it in this gray area that is involved as well. So here, the words of the Buddha are: refraining from strong drink and sloth-producing drugs, substances that cause heedlessness, the basis for heedlessness. So here the Buddha is describing ingesting certain substances that produce heedlessness. So if you're going to investigate his teachings and examine them, the first thing you might ask yourself is, what is heedlessness? Because this isn't necessarily a word that we regularly use in common language. So if you investigate the meaning of this word heedlessness, it means careless, thoughtless, inattentive, uncalm, unaware, or unmindful. So if you're trying to get to this enlightened mental state where you're purifying the mind and you're developing mindfulness or awareness of mind, and you need to do that in order to be able to see the unwholesome qualities in your mind, to be able to eliminate those, and you're able to then look at the wholesome qualities with your mindfulness and then promote those, encourage those, and don't allow them to fade. If you're taking substances that cause heedlessness, where you're careless, thoughtless, inattentive, uncalm, unaware, and unmindful, this is going to lead to a degrading of your mind, and you're not going to be able to make wise decisions that are going to produce wholesome results. So you would like to eliminate any and all substances that are producing heedlessness in your mind, so that then you can make wise decisions that's going to promote the ability for you to experience wholesome results. So then you might start looking at a few different aspects of how you might practice this in daily life. Here I'm sharing with you a list of certain things that we can talk about and look at. I'm not talking about all substances that cause heedlessness. We're just going to talk about a few, and then you can apply these understandings to various substances. Because the way that the Buddha taught is he taught this way that is timeless, that he couldn't have envisioned every single last substance that is going to be produced, because he taught 2,500 years ago. There's substances today that didn't exist during his lifetime. There's certain chemicals that we've invented, and we produce things like PCP or LSD or things like this. So he didn't give you an entire list of everything that could potentially be created in the future, because he wouldn't have known the different substances that were going to be produced. So he teaches in a way that's timeless, that any substance that produces heedlessness is going to cause harm to your mind, and then you're going to lack the ability to make wise decisions in your life. But then there's substances like marijuana, that these substances are in some cases producing heedlessness, but in some cases it can be used in a way that produces medical benefit. So there's individuals that have seizures. There's been documented cases where there's children who are having maybe 20 or 30 different seizures in any particular day. And they produce this CBD oil from a marijuana plant, and they give this child a little bit of CBD oil on their tongue, and now they don't have a seizure for like 6 months. So there's irrefutable evidence that the marijuana plant has medical benefits, but it can also be used for heedlessness as well. So if you're going to turn to something like marijuana, you would like to make sure that there's a valid medical reason that you actually need this plant. And in this situation, there's things like seizures and other things that people might use marijuana for. If you're using marijuana for stress or anxiety, this isn't actually going to solve the problem, because marijuana can't solve the stress and anxiety. The stress and anxiety is being caused by craving, desire, attachment in the mind. The marijuana can mute the stress and anxiety, but as soon as you don't have the marijuana anymore, the stress and anxiety is going to be there. So you can't actually treat stress and anxiety to eliminate it with marijuana. It'll only mute those effects, and then when you're not using marijuana, because the cravings are still there, the stress and anxiety is going to be there. So if you're using marijuana for a high, then someone's probably looking for THC, because there's two different parts of this plant, the THC and the CBD. The THC is the part that produces the high. The CBD is the part that is producing the medical benefits. So oftentimes if people are looking to promote a high with marijuana, they might be looking for THC, and they might even be smoking it. And this is actually causing harm to the lungs, and you would like to avoid any of that stuff. So if you're looking for medical benefits, you would probably be looking for a version of this plant that is high in CBD, and you're probably going to ingest it in ways like an edible, which isn't going to cause harm to the lungs, or maybe like an oil. So you can look at this type of situation if you ever need that for any particular medical purpose. Then you might look at something like cigarettes. Like we've learned over time that there's not any medical benefit. There's certain drugs and toxins that are in cigarettes, and this is why if you smoke it, it causes harm to the lungs, and you can get all kinds of medical problems with smoking cigarettes. So if you're smoking cigarettes, it would be wise for you to gradually diminish that and get to the point where you're no longer smoking cigarettes, because it's going to promote better health in the body. This is the cause and effect, or the action and result, the results of your decisions. Then certain prescription medications can actually be addictive. So if you are prescribed a certain medication, you would like to research that and figure out whether or not it's actually addictive or not. And in some situations, you can consult with the prescribing individual and decide whether or not there's maybe an alternative medication that is not potentially addictive, and use that medication rather than this other medication that can be addictive. But in some rare situations, maybe you need to take that medication that can potentially be addictive. And maybe there's the potential for you to be able to get off of that medication as soon as possible, or take lesser amount of it so it has less addictive qualities. So that's something that you're going to need to look at in terms of this heedlessness, because there's certain prescription medications that can produce heedlessness. Then you might look at your caffeine intake, because caffeine can actually produce heedlessness, where the mind goes into this excited state. But then if you ingest the caffeine, you can also drop off and go into this lethargic state, or this dullness, or this lack of motivation and encouragement. So if you're ingesting caffeine, then your mind might be going up into this excited state, and then it might be dropping off. You might even find that it's hard to sleep at certain times, or you might notice that you talk really fast or really rapidly. And if you start eliminating caffeine, you might notice that you get headaches, or you get dry mouth, or you might have other side effects or withdrawal symptoms. This can help you to see that even though it's legal to use caffeine, and the human laws are that it's legal, you can see with the natural law of Kamma that the cause and effect, that it's causing some unwholesome results by making the decision to use caffeine. So at some point you might decide to either reduce or ultimately eliminate your caffeine, and this will promote more clarity in your mind. You even need to pay attention to things like sugar, that if you take an excessive amount of sugar, it can produce a high, and then you can drop off from that. So you're going to want to pay attention to that. And then there's some people that might tell you that psychedelic substances will actually help you to get to enlightenment. You might see this in various conversations or message groups or things like this. This is actually untrue. Psychedelic substances do produce a certain amount of introspection, where you can look inwardly at the mind, and this is why people are thinking that it's helping them to get to enlightenment. But this is all being induced by a specific substance. You would like to promote this quality of the mind naturally by developing it through meditation and other techniques that the Buddha shares, where you can be introspective and you can look inward at the mind. If you're relying on a substance to be able to promote that, you're never going to get to the situation where the mind is naturally developing this quality on its own. So it would be unwise to look to psychedelic substances to think that it could actually help you get to enlightenment, because in reality, it's hindering you from being able to promote the natural quality of the mind to be introspective and look inward. So this is the fifth precept. If you guys have any questions on this, you're welcome to ask those. As I mentioned, by choosing to ingest substances that cause heedlessness, you're more likely to then kill, steal, have sexual misconduct, and lie. If you talk to people who are in prison, they might tell you that they're there for murder or stealing or robbing a bank or something like this. But if you talk to them in detail, about 80% of them will tell you that the true reason why they're in jail or prison is because of substances that cause heedlessness, that they would have never actually killed that person if they weren't high on some drug, or they would have never robbed that bank if they didn't need the money to support their habit. So this particular precept, if you practice it closely, then you have that clarity of mind that then you won't kill, you won't steal, you won't have sexual misconduct, and you won't lie, and it will produce better and better results in your life. So this is a very important precept to understand and practice really closely. So let me know what questions you guys have. Again, you can put it into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. I see Samantha has her hand up. If you'd like to go ahead, Samantha.
Hi, I just wanted some clarification on the first question I asked about euthanasia with either humans or animals. I understood your explanation for euthanasia for animals, but I think I understood that you were alluding to it being a different situation for a human. And I don't know if I didn't understand that correctly, or if you could explain it more if I did.
Yeah, in that situation, what I understand now, I wouldn't participate in euthanasia or assisted suicide with a human or with an animal, because that individual needs to live out its life and it needs to experience its Kamma. And the more Kamma that you experience in any one particular life, this is going to shorten your continuous rebirth in this cycle. And there's the potential that an individual can get to enlightenment at death. So if somebody tries to kill themselves, or there's assisted suicide or something like this, or euthanasia of a human, there's a certain craving for that individual to die. They want to die, which means that they're going to be reborn, either in this realm or some other realm. And depending on the condition of their mind, they might actually be reborn into a lower realm. Whereas if they just live out their natural life, even though they're maybe not enlightened in this life, there's the potential of getting to enlightenment at death for a human being, or for a individual who's in the heavenly realm. So if you chose to participate in assisted suicide or euthanasia of a human, there's a certain amount of craving, or this anger, or this ill will. There's lesser versions of that too. And then there's this ignorance, or this unknowing of true reality. These are called the 3 poisons, or the 3 unwholesome roots, or the 3 fires. We're going to talk about this next week in our class. All unwholesome Kamma is produced through craving, anger, and ignorance. And all wholesome Kamma is produced through generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. So if somebody's participating in euthanasia or assisted suicide, you're participating in this craving for this individual to die. And by making a decision through craving, desire, attachment, it's going to produce unwholesome results. There's individuals who have done that, and then they feel really guilty afterwards that they've actually participated in this. And this guilt and this fear and the shame that they might have in their mind, that's the results of their decisions of having practiced participating in euthanasia or assisted suicide of this individual. So I would guide somebody to not participate in those things. But of course, each individual needs to make a decision for themselves. There's a cause and effect that is going to be experienced. And if a student chose to assist somebody in suicide and they came to me for guidance, I would continue to help this person. There's no judgment in that. But if they asked me, like, David, what would you do? I wouldn't choose to assist somebody in suicide, because I know that would be a certain amount of guilt or shame or fear or other unwholesome results as part of that. It would be best to let this being live out its natural life. It could potentially get to enlightenment at death, or if it's reborn, it will experience an improved rebirth in that next life.
So this is different in say providing aid to someone that was having difficulty or pain or whatnot, because there's not death involved. So let's say you see, someone who's got a broken leg. Of course, I would help them instead of not helping them. But in helping them, does it limit the Kamma that they're supposed to be experiencing? And how is that different than helping someone, lessen their pain to the point of death?
Yeah, so in this situation where someone has a broken leg and you're assisting them to get medical treatment, you're practicing generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom, because now this individual is hurt and they're aspiring to become healthy, which is a wholesome outcome. Where when somebody's having a craving to die, they're longing, yearning for death or non-existence. And now you're participating in this unwholesome outcome of death. So in these situations, it's different.
Okay, I understand that now. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. That's a great clarification. Looks like Max, you have a question as well.
Yeah, there's a comment on YouTube and a question on Facebook, I believe. Sorry, let me get to the page. Sorry. Okay, Max with 2 X's on YouTube has a comment. Yes, I'm glad you mentioned food also. And you answered my question about meditation, mindfulness, being the practice to stay away from operating with a heedless mind. And then on Facebook, Mayuli asks, what about cacao? Is spelled CACAO. I use them to make vegan chocolate. I believe it has some caffeine.
Yeah, what I would do is purge all caffeine from your intake, because anytime you're taking in caffeine, there's a certain stimulant there that's stimulating the mind, and it's taking it into this upper, maybe not necessarily excited, but it's lifting the mind up, and it's using this substance to be able to do that. And that means that the mind's going to drop off. By the time you get to enlightenment, you don't have this up and down effect, that you've purified the mind, you've eliminated craving, anger, and ignorance, you've eliminated all the 10 fetters, that an enlightened being has sustainable energy throughout their whole day. This is often the reason why people ingest caffeine, is to get more energy. Well, that's a temporary solution. You might have energy for a few hours, but you're ultimately going to drop off from that. There's no need for caffeine in the body. The body doesn't need caffeine to survive or to live. But instead, people might choose to ingest caffeine in order to get this temporary energy and the stimulation. But then you're going to drop off from that. So if you allow the mind to continue to ingest caffeine, you're not going to be able to get to this natural energy that is sustainable throughout your whole day, because the mind's going up and down. An enlightened being, by the time you get to enlightenment, you get sleepy where you need some sleep, but you don't get exhausted. You don't get tired. By the end of your day, if you have craving, desire, attachment, and you're chasing after the objects of your affection, you might get certain things that you want where you'll get pleasant feelings, but in certain situations, you're not going to get what you want, and you get painful feelings in the unenlightened state. So now at the end of your day, if you've been chasing things around and you're not getting what you want, you might get to the end of your day and feel like you have bricks on your feet or on your shoulders, because you've been carrying around this burden of craving, desire, attachment. But when you get rid of that craving, desire, attachments, and you're no longer carrying around this burden, you can sustain your energy throughout your day, where you have this vigor, this motivation, this enthusiasm, this initiative and willingness to do something. But you're not going to be able to get to that natural state of mind if you're introducing this stimulant like caffeine, where it's going up and then it's coming back down. So I would encourage students that are interested in being able to clearly see their mind and get to this enlightened mental state to eliminate any and all caffeine, because it's not needed by the body to survive, and it's just a stimulant that is hindering you from being able to see the true quality of the mind.
I believe that's all the questions that I'm seeing.
Okay. Well, I will end class in the way that I typically do, which is just thanking all of you for joining for today's class. It's very wonderful to be able to share the original words of the Buddha with you guys, so you can see what he did teach and what he didn't teach. This is where you get real clarity on your practice. And it's very rare that you can learn something once and then just snap your fingers and get it instantly and be able to just apply that to your life so effortlessly and easily. So typically what you need to do is revisit these things more than one time. If this is the first time that you've learned the 5 precepts with me, you might need to walk away and digest this and think about it. You might need to read the book, because in the book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment, Chapter 7, I share a lot of details there that may or may not have been shared in the class. So by you revisiting this and digesting the content in the class and in the book, you can awaken more and more to this wisdom. And as you're applying it to specific situations in your life, this is where you can really gain wisdom through your practice. So today we've done some learning and we've done some reflection, and this has helped you develop a certain amount of wisdom. But now you need to practice in order to really cultivate the wisdom. And in certain situations, as you're practicing, you might be unsure of how to practice. So you might need to come back to me, or back to the book, or back to a situation where you're receiving guidance to do some more learning. and you might need to do some more reflection, and then you might need to do some more practice. But slowly but surely, you awaken more and more to this wisdom based in the 5 precepts that will allow you to then fully be able to be awake to these 5 precepts. And then it's not a gray area anymore. It becomes very black and white for you. At this point in time, when I look at the 5 precepts in any given situation in my life, it's very black and white for me. But as you first are learning, it does appear to be this big gray area. But when you understand enough of the variables and you understand all the different situations, and you get that through practice, that then it becomes more and more black and white. And as you practice for longer and longer periods of time, you encounter more and more situations where you could potentially apply these precepts. And that's where, through your practice, you really fully awake to the wisdom. And as you're having less and less pollution in the mind, you're able to see that wisdom more and more clearly. So how each individual chooses to practice, it's ultimately your decision. But more and more as you apply these teachings, it will become more and more clear to you how to practice them in any given situation. And where you're having challenges with that or struggles, you can always reach out for help, and I will provide you thoughts and guidance, things to reflect on and think about, and then you make whatever decision is best for you in that situation. And then I will help you regardless of what decision you make. So feel free to reach out either in classes by asking questions, by posting in the Facebook group. You can send private messages, or you can schedule personal guidance. We can meet and I can help you on a one-on-one basis. Next week in our group learning program on Sunday, I'm going to be in chapter 8, which is titled Transforming the 3 Poisons: Craving, Anger, and Ignorance. This is where you're going to learn a level deeper than what you learned in the Four Noble Truths of what's really plaguing the unenlightened mind and what's causing the mind to experience certain results that you experience. And by understanding this deeper level of detail, you'll understand the solutions more readily of why you're applying the various techniques and tools and practices in order to eliminate these pollutions from the mind. So I'm going to be sharing that next Sunday live at 9 a.m. in the morning and 9 p.m. And you can attend here online, or you can attend at the temple here in Chiang Mai. And then on Wednesday, I will be in the 4th part of a 4-part series where I'm going to be sharing Buddhist chanting and helping you to learn Buddhist chanting. And if at any point you can't attend the live classes, they're recorded in Facebook, YouTube, and in our podcast. You can digest these classes at your own free will whenever you have time. So thank you all for joining for our class today. Perhaps I'll see you guys in a future class. Have a very wonderful and lovely rest of your day. We'll see you next time. Sawadee ka.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.